Hello everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at Devise two-factor authentication using the two-factor authentication gem along with the QR code so that we can generate some QR codes for our app. If we come over to the Rails app itself and click Edit Registration, we can see that we have the option to enable two-factor. If we click on that, it takes us to this lovely page that's way too zoomed in that has a QR code in it. Now I can't show you this because my Android app doesn't let me record this. But if you trust me, I'm using the Google Authenticator app. I click on scan a QR code. I can scan this QR code if I hold it back far enough. And then I get a temporary password that I can put in here, which I have to put in to enable two-factor. I can type 399616 and hit verify. And now you can see this has changed to a enter OTP to disable two-factor. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit back instead. Just trust me that that works. If we, I guess not back, I'll go to the root. If we log out, or we can click the disable button, but you can see here I can also generate the QR codes on demand. But if I click log out and then I click log in with my email, and I'm using my email as my password, hopefully, so that I don't have to do this twice. There we go. I can now, after I log in, use a OTP. So I'll say 713752, just like that, to verify that I've logged in with my two-factor. I can come in here and I can type in a new code. It's 942501 and my password, and I can click update and it takes me to the root. So now I don't have two-factor anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and log out. I'll click log in and I'll log in with my email and my password. And you can see here, it just works like that. So there is an alternative where I could ask you for your two-factor code right here, but I thought it makes more sense to also let users log in with without two-factor. Now that said, that does require messing around with the Devise configurations a bit. So I do want to be clear, I don't do login stuff for a living. I don't worry about security. So there is a good chance that I might mess this up. So please tread lightly. Don't assume I'm correct with anything I'm doing here because I don't want you to like accidentally have a security vulnerability because you just trusted a guy on the internet. At the end of the day, you could also make a tutorial where you found a way for this to work. And then you could be storing your passwords in a plain text file, for example. So just don't trust the guy on the internet to know what he's talking about. But the way that I've managed to get this to work kind of makes sense to me. So hopefully it's correct. And if not, maybe go check the comments and see if anyone's calling me an idiot down there. But okay, we're gonna go through this real quick because there's a lot to cover. So I'm gonna start by doing a controller for pages in our homepage because we're gonna need that. I'm also gonna do a controller for our users because we're going to have a users controller. Then I'm going to do a bundle add for Devise because we're going to need the Devise gem for this. And then we're going to do a Devise install command that we've run a couple times before, which is going to be Rails G Devise :install and Rails G Devise user that installs it and generates the user command for us. We can then do a Rails G Devise :controllers for our users because we need to have our controllers generated for us. And then we can do a Rails G Devise :views command. I almost lost the plot there. So that's everything for our Devise setup. Next, we need to add the two-factor gem, which we need to start by saying bundle add devise-2-factor. That should add it to our gem file. We then need to run a Rails DB :encryption :init command because we need to enable encryption. That'll generate a couple things for us. Let's right click this to copy it. We can then type editor equals and then our in quotes code dot space dash dash wait space Rails credentials :edit. That will open this inside of VS Code, which is our Rails config credentials file that we're opening. This is our encrypted credentials, courtesy of, I think, Rails 6. We can save this now after we paste it in and hit Control-W. As soon as we hit Control-W to close it, the file will be encrypted and saved. Cool, so that's done now. Next, let's come into our routes. Now in here, you can either do a post request to enable or disable your OTP, which is just a button that's going to allow you to do that. Alternatively, you can set up all this QR code stuff. So I'm going to do the QR code stuff, which is going to have some additional flavorings with it, but you know, we'll just go from there. I'm going to say the root of the application is the pages controller home action. I'm going to move the Devise down here, and then I'm going to replace this with a Devise block that sets our controllers for our registrations controller because we're overriding that one, and our sessions controller. You can optionally include a do and an end block here for some of these other routes if you want them to be user scoped, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put them down here. Next, I create a get route for the enable OTP show QR code route. You'll see what this is for later. I just don't want to have to bounce back and forth a lot in this video. We send this to the users enable OTP show QR code action, and then we set it to be as the enable OTP show QR. We then have another one to enable the OTP verify, which is a post method because we're going to be posting to this endpoint. And then you can also set up a couple others where we have a get for user/OTP, where we show the OTP route. So this is where we go after we log in, I believe. I think this one is where we go to enable OTP. And then this one is the one where after we put in that QR code, after we scan it, we put in that one-time code, we post to this endpoint, and this is where it determines if what we've put in is correct. We then have a verify OTP, which is going to be where this one goes to, I think. And then we're going to have another verify for sessions. I don't remember which one of these we use, but we'll see. So that takes care of our routes. I just want to get that out of the way because it's like the least interesting part of this. Next, we have to come into our config and our initializers. In our devise.rb, we need to set this up so that it has the basics for our two-factor app, which we can do by running a generator, which is going to be rails g devise _2_factor. And we want to run this for the user model that we created. We'll run this. It does a couple things. It generates a migration, but it also messes around with our config warden right here. So it uses two-factor authenticatable instead of database authenticatable, which means we can no longer just log in with the database username and password, I believe. I could be wrong on that. So instead, we're going to create a new initializer. We're going to call this the devise _strategies.rb. And then inside of this devise strategies, we want to set up a new warden strategies that we're going to call password authenticatable. Again, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but we have a valid method that checks if the user params exist. If they do, we check if the user email and user password exist. For the authenticate, we grab the user by doing a find by on the email, where we use that email. We check if the password is valid by passing in the password. And then we do a success on our resource if it is, otherwise we fail. So this is just like a budget database authenticatable thing that we're using. And then this is going to allow us to add in this password authenticatable in here. So our actual method is going to look something like this now. So this is how I got the strategy to work, where it takes you to a new page. If you want to just do it all on the same page, when you log in, you would just get rid of this. You don't need, or you would get rid of this section. You don't need this section. But okay, that's what I have. At this point, you need to restart your app if you've made it this far. The next thing we need to do is we need to come up to our app, our controllers, and our users controller. So in here, there's a couple different things we have to do. First things first, we need to authenticate the user except for the show and the verify OTP methods. So in the show OTP, we're going to do that one first because it's the easiest one. This is just a show page. So let's go ahead and let's create this. We're going to come into our views because we're gonna set this up. This is going to be inside of a users folder right here. Right click, new file, show _otp.html.erb. In here, what we're going to do is just create a form tag that goes to the verify users OTP path with a method of post. It takes the OTP attempt that you enter, which is just your QR code, and then it just has a verify button. So this will get sent to our routes for the for the verify users OTP path. And then in here we have the verify users OTP path right here. And then this one is going to go into our users controller for a verify OTP action. So in our users controller, we need to do a verify OTP action. What does this look like? Well, this is what I came up with. Again, kind of shaky on this, so tread lightly, but I create a message verifier for the OTP session. I use the verifier to verify a OTP token, store that in a user ID, and then I do a user equals user.find by the user ID. I have a user.validate and consume OTP method that takes in the OTP attempt. If it works, it signs in the user and redirects to the root path. Otherwise, it flashes an alert that says invalid, and it redirects to a new user session path. So that's the verify one. The next one we can do is the enable OTP show QR code one, which is going to be if you click on the link to enable your OTP, it takes you to that show page that shows you that QR code. To do that, we set the OTP required for login. If it's already set to true, which by default it won't be, but if it's already set to true, you get redirected. Otherwise, you're not currently requiring OTP. So it sets the current user.otp secret to be a user.generate OTP secret. This is all coming from, ooh, I got a bug on me. Gross. This is all coming from our models, our user model. The two-factor authenticatable thing adds that to our user model, gets rid of the database authenticatable. So that's where some of these methods are coming from. It then sets an issuer and a label, and then that is set in your OTP provisioning URI, which I guess is used for something. I'm not entirely sure. We then call user.save if we've made it this far. Okay, so that takes care of our enable show, but now we need to do the enable action where we actually verify that what you've put in is correct. In that case, we check if the current user validate and consume params OTP attempt. Let me just expand this so you can see what's different. We check the token, and then we say, all right, the required for login is now true because you've entered a valid code after you've scanned the QR code, which we still have to set up. We call current user.save, and then we redirect to the edit user registration and say you've enabled two-factor. Otherwise, we say it's an invalid thing, and we redirect back to the enable show QR code stuff. So again, that's a lot of weird stuff happening here, but this is kind of just how I got it to work. Up here, we're going to have the disable OTP path, which has two approaches. The first one I got working was just this one, which is coming from the two-factor app. If you come into the demo, you can actually see how they get that login with OTP in the login or the new session route. They do that in here with the app. I think it's controllers, and it's going to be a user's controller. You can see in here they had an enable and a disable OTP. So if you just want to do this very basic, where you have a button that enables it and disables it, this is a good demo to look at. And I kind of just built off of it. But I didn't like this approach because I wanted to have like a separate page where you enter your OTP attempts. So that's what I did here. So again, I use the validate and consume. I pass in the OTP attempt. I set the required for login equal to false. I do a current user.save and I redirect. Otherwise, I tell you it's an invalid code. So this is just how you're actually disabling it when you click on the disable or when you enter your disable information. But okay, this is all just for the user's controller. The next question is, how do we deal with the registrations controller? So for registrations, it's mostly just updating our accounts. But if we actually come over here, we can do a Rails S real quick. Come over to localhost port 3000/user/sign in, click run pending migrations, go over to sign up, and we can do dean@example.com. And I'm going to copy this and paste it in twice. Click sign up. You can see here I'm signed up just fine. I can come over to our pages and our home page, and I can just set this up real quick so that we can just take a look at this. So if I come over here, I can now do a if users are signed up. I think it's these links that I want. Standard Devise stuff, edit user registration path, and the turbo method of delete because it's Rails 7, and then the login button. So I can refresh. We can see here I'm logged in just fine. Now, as for the QR code, let's go ahead and let's set that up real quick because we need to do this too. Let's come into our gem file, scroll down to the bottom here. And then in our gem file, we want to include just the QR code. We can then stop our server, do a bundle command to install this. And then in here, it tells you that you can run some of these commands to generate a QR code. So I'm just going to show you how to do this real quick. If you're curious, we've covered QR codes on the channel before. But effectively, you can call raw with the rQR code, create a QR code.new. You can pass in whatever you want in here, which will then generate something like this. In my case, I set the current user.otp provisioning URI, user email, issuer, etc. But now that I'm looking at this, we do also have the issuer stuff being set in our controller with the @provisioning URI. So I could have probably also done something similar for the other action. But this is specifically for the homepage, just kind of messing around to see what's possible. So if we do a Rails S real quick, we can go ahead and refresh. And you can see here it just generates a bunch of stuff on the page, which is kind of boring. But if I do a .as SVG right here, it'll just automatically create a QR code for me, which is pretty cool, pretty snazzy. It means I don't have to worry about, figuring out how to do this by hand. I think there might even be like a QR code tag, but again, that's above my pay grade. So we have this ability now to create this QR code. Let's go ahead and let's add this to our edit registration. So for this, we have to come into our Devise views, our registrations, and our edit page. And in our edit registration, we have to do a couple things. So the first thing we want to do is set up the ability to enable and disable OTP. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to paste this, I guess, below the currently waiting for confirmation thing. So we check if the resource.otp required for login. If it does have OTP required for login, we want to enter the thing to disable OTP. We create a text field, we put in the OTP attempt. So this is that parameter you've been seeing all over our user's controller. It's just quite literally a text field that has that set. So that's all it is, no magic there. If we want to enable OTP, we have a link to our enable OTP show QR code path, just like that. We can come over here and refresh, and you see we have this enabled 2FA. If I click on this link, it'll take me to a thing that says users controller enable OTP show QR is missing a template, which means we have to create the view for it. So we right click on our users folder, new file, and we need to actually call this something. So this needs to be our enable enable underscore OTP underscore show underscore QR.html.erb. Bit of a mouthful, but hopefully you'll forgive me. Now in here, we should technically have the user's controller, which set that at provisioning URI. But I'm going to go ahead and copy what I have for this page, and then we'll refactor it as we go. So in here, we have, again, our raw QR code. We have just a header, and then a form tag that takes us to the enable OTP verify path, which is, again, that enable OTP verify that checks if our QR code is correct. If it is, we set OTP required for login equal to true, and then we save it. Otherwise, it'll just, reject it. And then after we do that, we pass in the text field tag OTP attempt, we submit, and then we're good. Now for this QR code, this does have this intersection right here, which is going to be very similar to what we have in our user's controller, where we have the at provisioning URI right here. So you could probably just set that in your controller and then replace all of this with like the at provisioning underscore URI or whatever we called it. I'm going to just leave it like this and leave that as an exercise for the viewer. And then we have the rest of this. So let's go ahead and let's refresh now, and you can see we get this QR code here. Now, the issue with scanning this is you can already scan it into your Google Authenticator, but there's no way for us to enable it because although we have all of these endpoints in our user's controller, I think we still need to edit our user's registration. But I'm going to go ahead and scan this, and I'll see if this works. So let me just go ahead and remove the old one real quick. I'll click the plus button in my Google Authenticator, click Scan QR Code, scan it, scroll down, and now I can hopefully add this in, which is going to be 684890, and click Enable and Verify. Okay, cool. So that is actually already working. So we already have that set up in our user's controller, which does make me question what I've done in my Devise registrations controller at this point. So we have that. What we want to do now, I'm actually realizing what I did in the registrations controller. What we want to do now is we want to check if we can disable this. So to disable it, we can enter whatever we need to in here, which is going to be 763877, I think. Yep. And then we can copy our email, paste it into our current password, click update. And we can now see that we have done something here. Now we have a bunch of unpermitted parameters in here for our OTP attempt, which is something we do have to worry about. We can edit our user profile, and we'll see we're still running into that issue. So what does the unpermitted parameters mean? Well, it effectively just means that in our controllers, our Devise controllers, our registrations controller, we need to permit the parameters that we are trying to use here. So up at the top, just like when we add our username or all that other stuff before, we need to edit the account update parameters right here. And we need to, then once we have that, there's a couple other things we can set up in here. But if we now try and do this, I'll copy the email again. We can put in our new two-factor code, which will be a 570245. We can paste this in, click update. If we hit enter now and we scroll up a bit, you'll see that we're permitting the parameters, but on account update, it's not actually doing anything. Well, see, the issue is we can tell this to submit, but it's ultimately just going to go to our update method in our Devise controller. So whatever the super is doing is the problem child here. And we can look for this by going for like Devise, registrations, controller, or something. Come in here, check the registrations controller. We can look for whatever the update method is doing in here, and we can just take a look at all of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this up to not use the super, And instead, we're going to say this needs to do a couple things. So first, we grab the resource class. We call it toAdapter.get, send a current resource name to key. Again, there might be a better way to do this. I don't know. And then we redirect to the edit registration path with the resource name and return if should disable OTP and not disable OTP. Otherwise, we process the standard update, or then we process the standard update, I should say. So what do all these do? Well, let's start with the should disable OTP. So we'll come down here and we'll say, if you ever should disable the OTP, you're going to say resource.otp required for login and params user OTP attempt is present and the current user is present, and that's it. So if you have entered something into your OTP field and you've entered something into your current password field, then you're probably trying to disable OTP. If you want to disable OTP, then we have to do some checks. So we say disable OTP, we grab the OTP attempt from our params, we grab the current user from our params, we say resource validate and consume the OTP. If that's true and the resource has a valid password from that current password, so remember we've entered both a OTP and a current password, then we say OTP required for login is false, resource.save, set a flash message, return true. Otherwise, set an error, and then return false. Now the appropriate error message is just something I threw together, which has invalid OTP unless validate and consume the OTP, and invalid password unless resource valid password, because you're already logged in, so it probably doesn't matter if you're trying to guess which one is which, but maybe you want to change this, I don't know. Then we need to come back up here. So at this point, we're done with all of these, but we still have this process standard update. This is just some additional stuff. Come down here. We have the previous unconfirmed email is resource.unconfirmed email. If resource.respond to, then we do the resource.updated. We yield the resource and we set some flash messages for all of this other stuff. Now this might look a little bit familiar if you looked at the page we were just on. Come back over here to our Devise registrations controller. A lot of the stuff like clean up password resources is actually just from our, I guess our update method right here. It's just me doing what the rest of Super had before I got in the way and, threw all of my stuff in there. So like everything from this resource updated down is right here. And even the previous confirmed stuff, this is kind of like a halfway point between the self.resource and the rest of this is where we insert all of our logic here in our update method. But okay, that's it for our registrations controller. Let's come over here and let's refresh. I'll copy my password, I'll paste it right here, and then I'll put in my OTP again with a 965801, click update, and I can hit enter here, and I can F11, and now we can see we've actually updated something. So we have a consumed timestamp, and we have a OTP required for login, which was right here. And we can hopefully see if we now click on edit registration that we no longer have OTP enabled. So we're now able to toggle it inside of our edit registration stuff. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's enable OTP. Let's put in the, or let's scan this with a QR code again, just like this. Back up the phone, scroll down. It's going to give me a new code, which looks like it's 299809. Verify and enter. So now I have OTP again. I can click, or I can go back. I guess I broke my back button somehow. So now we have this. Let's go ahead and let's log out. And when we click log out, it's going to tell us invalid email for whatever this is. So let's come back to our home page. And that's because this is not inside of a current user path. So let's go ahead and let's move this up here. And now we should be good. So let's click login. I'll log in with dnetexample.com, click login, and we can see that is taking me straight to the home page. That's because our registrations are now set up, but we still haven't set up our sessions. So let's go ahead and let's deal with our sessions controller. So the sessions are same kind of beast. You come over here to the Devise controllers, but this time you're looking for the sessions. You're seeing what it does in Super for the create action, and then we're going to mess around with that. So in our sessions controller, we have the create action. We'll uncomment this. We don't do Super anymore. We're going to do our own logic in here, which is very scary indeed. So we have a create action. We do our self.resource. We call warden.authenticate. We have in auth options, we merge a strategy of password authenticatable. And I don't know if this is fully necessary, but this is how I have it set up, and I guess it works. We then do a if resource and resource.active for authentication. We call a resource.otp required for login. So if it's required for login, we're going to do all this stuff. So what do we do in here? We create our verifier, our token, and then we grab our token and we store it into our session OTP token. We then sign out and redirect to the user OTP path and return. Now, if OTP is not required for login, we're going to set the flash message, sign in, yield the resource, respond with the resource. This is going to be very similar to what you see inside of your sessions create currently inside of a Devise controller. Over here, what we're doing is we're testing if you can log in using the OTP, but then you're saying, all right, you know what, actually, we're going to ask them for the OTP. But we do need to check if the resource requires OTP for our login. So then we're going to sign them out just to make sure. So if we do this and we log out and we click login and we paste in our, if we save this, hopefully this saves, and then we log in, we can paste in our email. If we click login, it'll now take us to this path because this user requires OTP. So it's going to do this. It's going to grab our token and then it's going to do the sign out. So we can come over here and we can say 186571, hit verify, and that now seems to be working. But let's test this. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to sign up as john@doe.com with a password of password. And I'm going to click log out from john@doe.com. I'm going to click log in with john@doe.com with a password of password. And because John does not have a OTP required for login, it's just going to do self.resource, if resource and resource active for authentication. And then it's going to do redirect to here. So I'm going to click login and it logs me right in. Now, if I do like a login, I say john@doe.com with a password of 123456789, whatever. I click login. That's not going to work. So that is all now set up, hopefully correctly. Now, I don't think I'm really missing anything here, but if I remember correctly, inside of our Devise two-factor, there is going to be something about, what is it? I think it's like filter parameters, where it tells you to prevent two-factor authentication codes from leaking. If your application logs get breached, you'll want to filter sensitive parameters from the Rails logs. So let's go ahead and let's do this. Inside of our config, we're going to have a initializers. If I can get this bug to stop landing on me, I have to go throw it outside after this. We should have a filter parameter logging. In here, we can do we can either add the OTP attempt in here, or we could just like add it in here if we wanted to. I'll leave it on a separate line so it's clearer what we're doing. But yeah, we're just adding the OTP attempt right there. You would then have to stop your server and restart it. There's also a section on generating backup codes, but as you can see, this video has already droned on for quite some time. So I think we've covered that as well. Additionally, if you want to show your OTP attempt on your new page instead, you could set up your sessions new to just have the OTP right here if you wanted to. And then you would just have to set that up similar to how they have it set up here inside of, I guess, our user's controller maybe, where after you log in, you then say in your user's controller, you enable OTP or something to that effect. That's going to depend on how you set that up. But in my case, I thought this didn't make a lot of sense, so I'm going to leave that out. Finally, there are some things inside of our not our initializers, our config, our locales, our devise.en inside of the registrations block. We're going to add two more quick little messages. One is for OTP disabled, two-factor authentication disabled successfully, and then one is for invalid OTP. So these are just going to display whenever you enter your OTP password, or not password, your OTP somewhere, and you're going to have like a potential error message that you're flashing to the user, depending on what you do, or you have like OTP disabled. You're going to have the messages coming from here. So whenever you see like OTP disabled as a set flash message, we're actually grabbing that from our locales, just so you're aware. So those are being set right there for the sake of accessibility. But okay, this is like the best implementation I could come up with. I do apologize. This was a longer video. I spent probably like 4 or 5 hours on this today trying to piece this together. I'm going to commit this to a GitHub repo so that you can check this out. If you have suggestions for improvements to this, I would suggest putting in a pull request, we can take a look at it. Of course, this application is not tested, but you know, if there's something that we want to build on from here, we can maybe take a look at it just to see, like, you know, what we can build off of this. But yeah, I would suggest checking out the GitHub repo to see if there were any pull requests since the time of this video was recorded, in case someone finds like an obvious security vulnerability in my implementation. Because again, I don't particularly do this stuff for a living. I tried to keep it above board. I tried to have people look at it, but you know, all of us make mistakes, so it is what it is. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.